but related.
Parent and community engagement. Oh, okay. The meeting of the Committee on Parent and Community Engagement of the Board of School Directors will please come to order. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Director Leonard,
Present.
Director O'Halloran,
Here.
Director Seamson, Director Zambor,
Present.
Chair Carr.
Present.
We have 5 committee members present.
The Chair will now ask the Secretary to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The Chair invites any members of the audience who wish to participate to do so and asks that those who do not wish to participate please remain silent during the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish-speaking members of our audience.
Buenas tardes y bienvenidos a la Junta Escolar de las Escuelas Públicas de Milwaukee. Si desea escuchar esta reunión en español, por favor llame al 312-626-6799. Nuevamente, 312-626-6799. E introduzca el número de reunión 608-130-5362. Nuevamente, el número de reunión es 608-130-5362. Gracias.
This meeting is being conducted in person from the Central Services Building. In order to allow as much public access and participation as possible, this meeting is also being broadcast via live stream on the MPS website and on the MPS YouTube stream, the links to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. For each of our items of business, we will hold a discussion and public hearing. If you wish to speak, please fill out a speaker slip and bring it to our board clerk, Dr. Mann. Virtual speakers are asked to remain on the platform until you are called upon. After speaking, virtual speakers may follow the rest of the meeting using the broadcast information previously mentioned. When you are called upon to speak, please state your name and spell your last name for the record. For the sake of fairness and to give everyone a chance to speak, the chair reserves the right to limit the length of time allowed to any one speaker. Written testimony will be accepted for transmittal to the board. Send this testimony to the Office of Board Governance, P.O. Box 2181, Milwaukee, Wisconsin 53201-2181, or fax to 414-475-8071, or email it to governance, GOVERNANCE, at milwaukee.k12.wi.us. Just as a reminder, Robert's Rules of Order dictates that all comments should be directed to the chair of the committee. Also, any questions or requests, including those from the public, committee members, or the administration, are to be directed towards the chair, who will determine the most efficient way to address them. For the safety of all and to ensure the good order of the meeting, harassment or intimidation tactics of any kind will not be tolerated. Anyone who engages in such harassing or intimidating words or actions will immediately be asked to cease. If such behavior continues, a recess will be called and the offending parties will be removed from the meeting. Anyone ejected from the meeting may continue to listen to the meeting or access the agenda items online. However, the individual will not be allowed to rejoin the meeting. Also, no one other than members of the board, designated staff, and those who have been invited to present or participate in items of business will be allowed on stage before, during, or after meetings of the board and its committees. Finally, for our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting the Meetings, Agendas, and Minutes page of the MPS website. Now, let's begin. Madam Secretary, item 1.
Item 1 is a report with possible action on the services provided to students with disabilities in the least restrictive environment, the LRE. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the administration please present this item?
Madam Chair and members of the committee, the item before you on this evening's agenda is the report on services provided to students with disabilities in the least restricted environment, LRE. Travis Pinter, Senior Director of Specialized Services, will provide an overview of this report and guide us through the presentation. Upon completion of the report, we'll be more than happy to entertain any questions that you may have. Travis.
Chair Carr, members of the committee, Travis Pinter, Senior Director of Specialized Services. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. The LRE, or Least Restrictive Environment data, is reported to the board 3 times a year. The June report allows us to take a look back at the entire year and also compare to where we were at last year at this time. I'll be referencing the second page of the first attachment in my summary, if you'd like to follow along. You will note the 3 indicators associated with LRE, 5A, B, and C. The state has set a threshold for each indicator that we are aiming to surpass. In the case of 5A, it is a minimum, and in the cases of 5B and C, it's a maximum threshold. So the table I've put together on that page allows us to see monthly progress, but also a more longitudinal view when comparing last May to May of 2023. In all 3 indicators, you'll note that we've made solid progress, increasing 5A from about 84 to 87%, decreasing 5B from about 15 to 11.4%, and 5C from 0.28 to 0.17%. So that's good to see. This past year in particular, we have emphasized inclusion of our students with special education services in school specials and art, physical education, and music. Our SSRMs, or Specialized Services Regional Managers, created a professional development course on this topic for the vast majority of school staff and administration. We continue to be focused on providing every possible opportunity for our students with disabilities to participate in their education alongside non-disabled peers. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Do any members of the public wish to make comments?
Madam Chair, we have no request for public testimony on this item.
Okay. Do committee members wish to make comments? Director Leonard.
So I guess, yeah, I have a few questions and then just a concern that may have less to do with the actual full report, but I believe that you could answer the question at least. So when we say that that's a stage threshold, is that a legal threshold?
Administration.
Chair Leonard, members of the committee, the thresholds are recommended by the state. It's one of our indicators, and so amongst those other indicators, in terms of legal, I wouldn't say, but I mean, it is one of our indicators where they give us a certain criteria to surpass in terms of their rating of us and certain other criteria.
Thank you. Then let me, so I asked the question before from the audit department when we were flagged for that numerator denominator difference that was not what they wanted it to be. Is that in direct relationship to this? I don't know if you can answer that.
Director Leonard, members of the committee, I don't know the specific answer to that. Specifically, I do know that this is being one of the indicators that the state looks at. This is part of the state's sort of evaluation of various criteria that we're working on to improve or stay ahead of. And so this is just one of those pieces of that. I don't know the specific answer to that.
Director Leonard.
Thank you for that. Just for my clarity, I guess so I was a special ed teacher, and I get a little bit confused by when we do not get students that do not meet criteria, okay? And I will be honest with you, I always have a concern that part of the reason that they don't meet criteria, and this is just conspiracy, I'm going to be very honest with you, but it's because we want to keep those ratios in a greater balance. And I'm always concerned because having worked with so many students that really do need much more consistent interventions, I do not always believe we are doing that. In fact, I know we're not doing that. I know we're trying to, but we're just not always fulfilling those needs like we should. And I get concerns from parents every year, 1 or 2 or 3, never a lot, but they feel that their students' needs have not been met because they don't meet criteria. And I think that that's something that we have to look at as seriously as we can. I can't say that happens at every school. I have been in buildings where we met those needs as best we could. We did interventions on a daily basis, but there are other places where I am hearing that that is not the case. We either don't have staff to do it, or for some reason the parent is feeling that their child is making no progress, and they're starting to ask me, what can I do to resolve this situation? So I'm sort of asking you that question, but it's also a concern.
Administration follow-up?
Director Leonard, members of the committee, Travis Pinter, Senior Director of Specialized Services. To that, I would say that we did, as you're all aware, I think several years ago, move to that centralized evaluation team, and part of the purpose of that was to reduce bias as much as possible. We have an objective eye on it. And I would say that in looking at the data over the last several years, our identification rates have remained remarkably consistent. So I could assure you that it hovers around 50%, and it'll go up and down depending, but that hasn't changed much. Now, when you look at it on a case-by-case basis or a particular constituent's concern, I think that can sometimes stand out, that concern, but really they're looking at the criteria. For this report, I would say it has more to do with the amount of time our students are spending in that environment than the overall numbers, which we're at about 20% as a district in terms of special education. Those evaluation numbers have been pretty consistent.
Okay, thank you.
A follow-up? Any other members of the committee wish to speak? Okay. Is there any further discussion? Okay. Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item number 2, which is an update with possible action on the district's multi-tiered system of supports and interventions. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the administration please present the item?
Madam Chair and members of the committee, this evening we bring to you an update on the district's multi-tiered systems of supports and interventions. This report will be focused on the district's proactive strategies used to support children and school teams through a variety of these interventions. To present this report is Mr. John Jagman, who is the district's discipline manager, and we also have Daniel Hennessy here with us as well. Take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Posley. Chair Carr, members of the committee, John Jagman, District Discipline Manager. As Dr. Posley stated, I am here to present our monthly update on the multi-tiered system of supports and interventions supporting students district-wide. As always, we are centered around our 5 priorities for success. Within this plan, we are looking how we strengthen communication and collaboration across the district with all staff, students, and the community. We are ensuring that we have fiscal responsibility and transparency. We are looking at developing our staff in new approaches and new practices, all in an effort to improve district and school culture, ultimately leading to increasing academic achievement and accountability. This June report is going to be looking at some of the strategies and programs we've been doing across the whole year. It's kind of like a year-end summary as well. We have school PBIS Tier 1 teams and building and intervention teams, often called BIT, at all of the MPS high schools. They meet monthly. They submit minutes. Those are reviewed by the district's PBIS team to help identify areas of need and how to better support schools and students. Throughout the year, there have been over 4,900 students who have received a documented Tier 2 or Tier 3 intervention. Those are students who have been identified by the Building and Intervention team They use data, they use classroom observation to identify those students who need additional support around behavior, and we've had over 4,900 throughout the year have that intervention identified for them. There's a wide variety of collaborative professional development offered across a variety of teams and departments, all available through LMS. Some are some self-paced modules, some are after-school PD, some are day-long PDs that staff leave the building and attend on a variety of needs and a variety of issues. There are also the restorative practices coaches in the 8 restorative practices cohort schools that are provided with on-site coaching for at least 20 hours a week on-site in the school. The restorative practices coaches work with the school on their implementation. There are also the 53206 Promise Partnership Schools with the trauma support specialists that are there all day, every day as well, working with students. Those students are identified for that Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention. They also work with staff members around Tier 1 supports in the classroom, really providing that whole body mental wellness support for those students. The school social work department, school psychologist department, and others have worked to expand the mental health interventions and a comprehensive mental health framework. They have collaborated with Wisconsin DPI and their mental health framework, and they have actually expanded and added some mental health interventions throughout the year. School psychologists have provided professional development to their staff focused on non-discriminatory assessment practices and interventions. They have taken some of the work with Courageous Conversations about Race and Anti-Bias and integrated that into how they do professional development around assessment practices and interventions so their staff are kind of aware of the biases and the role of race in those interventions and practices. And the school social work department is continuing their integration of Courageous Conversations protocols. They have a variety of PLCs, a variety of book studies, and again, they're carrying that work forward into their implementation of the mental health framework. We have our Culture, Climate, and Alternative Suspension Toolkit that has been provided to all MPS staff members. Every month, there is a session at the Principal Leadership Institute that pulled a specific best practice from the toolkit, and principals were provided that best practice. They were in spaces to talk with their colleagues around how they implement it, and then that same best practice was provided to the school's discipline champions to ensure that staff members were integrating that within their classroom. We had our monthly district discipline disproportionality team. There's a cross-departmental team that meets monthly to review various data points and various metrics and talk about schools in need, individual students in need, and overall implementation across the district. Where are our next steps? Looking at the data throughout the year, we see that the most utilized classroom strategies included one-on-one conversation, redirection, and parent contact. Again, those were the classroom strategies that staff would implement while the student was still in the classroom with those classroom managed behaviors, as we call it. When they are working with a student in the classroom, they document what strategies they are using, and those were the 3 most implemented. Then when we look at behavior referrals, these are for those more serious situations that an administrator is involved in. We see the most utilized alternative to suspensions included an administrator counseling and a conference. Continuing with our staff, student, and community collaboration on how we are engaging those key stakeholders in this work, we have our monthly District Equity Leadership Team, or DELT, meeting monthly with representatives from the vendor Courageous Conversations About Race, and they lead us in specific activities and conversations around building equity district-wide. We also had our 2-day seminar in May, My Brother's Keeper, again was facilitated by representatives from the vendor, having a 2-day seminar at North Division, really diving into how we can elevate the voices of Black and Brown students throughout the district. Then we have our monthly Courageous Conversations About Race sessions. We have at least 2 to 3 cohorts every month, continuing to work towards our 3-year plan of March 1st, 2024, to have all MPS staff members attend that. The 31 middle and high schools all have their student discipline committees. Those meet monthly. Again, they submit those minutes centrally. Their recommendations go to the school leadership. They also go to the district leadership, that discipline disproportionality team, and it is reviewed as part of the data points in that. We also had our 2 student leadership summits. We had our summit back in October. And then we had our hybrid summit back in April that we talked about last month, where students engaged in a school-level conversation that was then shared across the district in kind of a hybrid format. Then the Gender Identity and Inclusion Department is working on creating gender sexuality alliances, or GSAs, in schools and building that program up as we go. Black and Latino Male Achievement is doing their mentoring, their Manhood Development Academy, and BLMLA buddies at the identified schools throughout the year. Lastly, as we look at next steps as we go into June and plan for next school year, we have our year-end data analysis retreat in a couple weeks. That is where the district discipline disproportionality team is meeting. We are looking at a wide variety of data points throughout the year: discipline data points, intervention data points, student voice, things that came up at the community conversation, and really laying out our next steps as a district, and then what can go back to each of the departments. We have our annual discipline disproportionality survey that is open through this Friday. Again, that is staff at the school providing recommendations to school leadership and district leadership around discipline, and some kind of recommendations. That'll be a data point at our year-end analysis. A lot of this work is going to be integrated within school improvement plans. So as schools identify their improvement next steps for next school year, and those teams are meeting as we speak, they are integrating their school-level next steps into their school improvement plans. We have continued sessions of courageous conversations about race. We have 5 more in June, and we've got 6 planned for August before the school year starts. Then next school year, we'll have our additional school year plan, but continuing to push to have all MPS staff members attend that. And we are working on alignment of 4 pathways supporting district culture and climate. We are looking at how PBIS, restorative practices, mental wellness, and anti-racism are pathways that all help to lead schools towards that improved culture and climate. Thank you. That is all. We are now open for any questions.
Before we go to the committee, are there any members of the public?
Madam Chair, we have no request for public testimony on this item.
Okay. Any members of the committee wish to speak? Director Stevenson? Oh.
It was a tie. Yeah, I just had a question from the BIT team, or I guess that's implied in the title. You said that they can, as they're reviewing data, submit sort of needs that they have. I was just wondering if across the district there are any areas of need that seem to be common, or is it really school-specific in terms of, what they need at the school level? If that makes sense.
Administration?
Chair Carr, members of the committee, John Jagman, discipline manager. So within that tiered support, the best first intervention is check and check out. Research shows that it's the lowest level to implement. It needs the fewest resources. Schools already have the systems in place. So in terms of the needs, that really is the recommended first intervention for students. After that, then it can kind of tier a little bit differently. There's social academic instructional groups, or SAG groups. They can individualize check and check out, where they maybe meet the needs of the student a little bit differently. And we also have what are called BAPEs, BAIPs, Behavior Assessment Intervention Plans. That is for a student, and then they have a meeting and they create a behavior pathway similar to what's in an FBA BIP, but it's not an FBA for a student, but it really looks at that behavior pathway. What is the behavior of the student? What's the function of it? What's the antecedent? And what's the replacement behavior? So they kind of really focus on those interventions.
Yeah, so then it's not so much what does our school need to deal with this behavior, it's more like what is the student's need from those choices? Is that?
So Chair Carr, members of the committee, sorry, 2 different answers then. So yeah, that answer is on individual student need at Tier
Right.
2. At the Tier 1 level, it would be school-based, where they look at overall, when there's a classroom behavior, staff members indicate what is the behavior category. The Tier 1 team then looks at that, and that does vary by school. So at some schools, the top behavior might be disrespect to peers. And so they know they have to kind of work on that collaboration. Some it might be on task during academics, and they might work on that. Some classes, it might be students leaving the classroom. So that is much more of a school-based decision, but that is the Tier 1 team looking at that classroom behavior that is documented.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just wondering if there were any commonalities, like, we should, as a district, we could focus on this, but it sounds like it's very school-specific. And then, if it's okay, just one more question. Okay. With the alternatives to suspension, we have a lot of things in our toolbox. Are there some that you're starting to see an increase in? I mean, I think there are the standard top 3 that we see frequently. Are there others that are maybe newer that we're trying that you're starting to see being used more often in the district, or that where we're getting more positive feedback on that we're finding very effective?
Chair Carr, members of the committee. So yeah, the 2 that are the top of counseling and a conference are the more traditional ones that have been around. We have seen an increase in restorative conversation and repairing harm circles as that work continues. We are also working with schools on mediation as a possibility in the school level. And schools did this a lot, but now we made it as part of the process is an administrator can select referral to BIT. So as part of that process, the administrator themselves can select an infant in campus referral to BIT. In case the BIT maybe hasn't gotten to that student or hasn't had the data points, the administrator can actually select that as an alternative to suspension for the building intervention team to then review that student's data and get them on an intervention. So I would say those are the kind of like the more newer ones that we're seeing an increase in.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Director O'Halloran?
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 questions. One, so the, not the presentation, but the other attachment, the updates PDF, that's the report that supports it, lists, it's really in-depth. It shows the amount of work that is being done. My question for that is, do we have this kind of synthesized into a matrix that would have like the school name on the left side of the sheet and like along the top, like BLMA, GSA, violence-free zones, restorative practice coaches, that would show us at the school level which supports are in which schools? Because from a decision maker standpoint, it would be nice to know, I think that would help us visualize where are the gaps? Do we, should we be increasing, when we talk about budgets, should we be putting more in this bucket? Is there a document that currently exists? And if not, would it be possible to get a document like that created? Not just with funding, and now I'm going to put a twist on it, right? It's not enough to just say we fund a position there. It's also interesting or would be informative to know that that position is filled. So those were 3 questions within one question. My apologies.
Administration?
Chair Carr, members of the committee, John Jagman, Discipline Manager. So we can get this to you. We're updating as we speak. We have a directory of support, a culture and climate directory of support that lists all the different PD, all the different kind of supports that are out there. Then all of these teams that kind of have a touch point with schools, like restorative practices, PBIS, BMLA, we have been collaborating to create an internal matrix of what supports we have at Tier 1 and Tier 2. We can then add the layer of which supports are at which school. Like that is doable, but it's kind of embedded within that directory of school support that we are currently updating so that schools have. So we can definitely get that to you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, over the years, what we have been doing is John's team has been bringing all of these individuals together, and we have what we call a system of support for all of the regional support systems and who support that particular region. We've been doing the same things. That's one of the things that Paulette has been charged with, is to get that blueprint of what's happening in every single school so that we are able to overlay and show exactly what's happening in each school and the value that is added. So that is something that will be coming to a desk near you very soon. So that is a work that we're working on, and the great thing about it now is we are 100% fully staffed when it comes to those areas. However, there was 2 other positions just that was added through the budget that we haven't filled. But for the most part, all of those supportive areas have leadership there. Thank you.
Director O'Halloran?
Thank you. My other question for the next steps, slide number 8, we talked about courageous conversations, and I know through the budget discussions, we had an amendment put forward to increase professional development opportunities at specific schools. And I was just wondering, I think we had discussion around possibly a task force creation, or what would those funds go to? Would it be a second round of courageous conversations, or funding additional facilitators? So I was just wondering if you could give us either an update of what you would envision those funds going towards, or if you're not at that point, which that was like a week or two ago, I can understand if you don't have a complete roadmap yet, when you would anticipate having that vision for implementation.
Administration?
Chair Carr, members of the committee, John Jagman, District Manager. So part of what we're going to do at our DELT meeting, which is on Monday, actually is to kind of get that group to start that. That's not going to be the task force, because we do want the task force to be more comprehensive and some school-based staff. But that district equity leadership team on Monday, we already talked about, we want to all bring into space what do we feel are going to be some of those next steps. Then we are also already working with the vendor to possibly expand the number of trained facilitators as well. That was part of that conversation, I believe, at the budget meeting as well. So we're looking to get that contract going here as well. But I would say it's in route, but we're hoping to have it like signed, sealed, and delivered ready August 1st to kind of go for it.
Director Howland?
No follow-up, thank you.
Thank you. And I do want to say that we did miss one registered speaker, 2 registered speakers. And so we will disrupt this process and go to that process.
Yes, we will go to our 2 individuals who are registered on the virtual platform to speak. The first person is Angela Lucas Foley. Please state your name, spell your last name, and begin your testimony.
Angela Lucas Foley, Lucas space Foley.
Thank you.
Good evening, Superintendent Posley, Chair Carr, and directors. As I have done before, I come to you this evening as a white educator and proud member of ARWE, Aspiring Anti-Racist White Educators of Milwaukee. I am focusing once again tonight's testimony on follow-through from our board of directors. This body, current and former, have passed many resolutions that look to support transforming Milwaukee Public Schools and the quality of day-to-day experience of all students, but particularly our Black and Brown students and families. At the risk of being too specific, Resolution 2021R-002, Student Voice and Equity, was presented in October 2022. It included that each school participate in a district-created equity evaluation tool led by students and a district-wide equity conference. This was mentioned on the floor in not so many words from Director Halloran. An equity audit might be a good place to start. What benchmarks or evidence do you have as board directors that this is occurring? Resolution 2021R-007 was presented in July 2020 and stated in part that the district has a legal and moral responsibility to provide its students with the best educational opportunities possible. What evidence do you have as board directors that this is happening? Resolution 2021R-022, the School to Prison Pipeline Resolution, was presented in January 2021. It included regular reports on the progress of accompanying agreements. Have these been brought to you as directors? What evidence do you have that this resolution is being put into action? Resolution 2019R-005, anti-racism, was presented in May 2019. It included ongoing training at all levels of the district. What is the status of this important resolution? What benchmarks have been provided to you as directors? What contracts and professional development time are included in the superintendent's budget? And perhaps most importantly, what
Yes.
I'm not sure if the call dropped or what happened, but There were about 3 seconds left, and I want to make sure that the speaker got her whole time to speak. So, technology, if our technology team is
Hello?
here. Oh, are you there?
I think I'm here.
Okay.
It is my fervent hope that Chair Carr and the directors seated tonight will make doing this good work on behalf of parents and the community their utmost priority. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker on the platform is Beverly Hamilton Williams. Please state your name, spell your last name, and begin your testimony. Beverly Hamilton Williams. Madam Chair, if the board wants to continue, I want to make sure that technology-wise, we have everything set up. If the board could continue your conversation, we'll check to make sure that the speaker can get through.
Thank you. Are there any more comments from committee members? Director Leonard?
Just a quick PSA for our listening audience. We are actually, and I'll say we, as I know that Director Carr and myself have already discussed this with other people from administration, we are in the process of putting together those listening sessions that would directly relate to some of this, not all of this. But I just wanted to mention that that process is ongoing and moving forward. I won't give you any dates yet because we have not gotten that far yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Are there other administration? Matt Chasen?
Thank you, Chair Carr. Matt Chasen, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. One of the things that we've learned through these presentations is that at the school level, as it relates to disproportionality, we set in the school improvement plans a goal of a 5% reduction annually. And while we only get to see the data in the aggregate form, in the second attachment here, where we see 79% suspension rate for our African-American students versus the 50% makeup in the population, can you give us a sense of how many schools are meeting their individual 5% goal mark? We don't get to see it in the aggregate level, and maybe you can speak to what's happening in the disaggregate level related to the school improvement plan goals.
Administration?
Chair Carr, members of the committee, John Jagman, Discipline Manager. So yes, as of June 1st, district-wide, it was 78.6% of all suspensions were for black students versus the 50.5% enrollment. So we can work on getting that, and I think I've shared this before, like part of the difficulty is in the hypersegregation of the city of Milwaukee. Like the 5% looks very different at some schools. There are some schools with 98, 97% black enrollment. There are some schools with 5% black enrollment. So like it's much more advantageous, and what schools do is they compare their just overall suspension rate of black students to the district kind of suspension rate of white students. So that's the better comparison, because then it doesn't matter if 97% of your population identifies as black or if it's 5%. So we can get you something that will kind of break it down by the school, but I just want to like it's not going to be which schools are hitting that 5% because of that disproportionality of how students are enrolled in the city of Milwaukee, because we're hyper-segregated. But as a district, we're looking, we'll be probably about 2% down, because it's about 78.2 now, actually, since the report.
Matt Chasen, any follow-up? Thank you. Any other members of the committee who wish to speak? Oh, Director Zombor.
Thank you. Is it possible to get information about the suspension events by grade level, and have each grade level broken down by behavior so that we can see patterns that are happening in different age groups?
Administration?
Chair Carr, members of the committee, yes, that is one of the data points that we look at as a discipline disproportionality team, is we look at all of the behavior events by grade, by special ed status, by school, by student, and then all of them we look at by behavior. So we would look at regular education students versus special education students, the behavior, events, and all of that. I will add, across the district, the top behaviors are disorderly conduct, fighting, and chronic disruption. By grade level, by regular ed, by special ed, the order of those three change, but those three are always the top three. Sometimes the more interesting is maybe after that, but those are the top three behaviors. They're 80% of all behavior events in the district are those three. So we have that. We can share with you what you kind of look at, but it's in the Excel that discipline team looks at monthly.
Any follow-up, Director Zomber?
Not on that particular item, but I do have another question. And then I have actually two questions about recess. I have a question wondering if we have information about the number of referrals that occur at recess, maybe by school. And then I'm also wondering, do schools document if recess is withheld? As I don't know if that would be considered a classroom management strategy, or is that an alternative suspension? Is that something we're documenting, where we could look at that?
Administration?
Chair Carr, members of the committee. So yes, when a referral is put in, a location is selected. So we have that when the location of playground is selected, we would have that, and we can have that by grade level, we can have that by school. So we can touch base on what you're actually looking for that. I'll clarify that there is a board policy around you cannot remove a student's recess as part of the disciplinary practice. So that is something we want to be aware of, that kindergarten through fifth grade, a student does have board right to their recess. So schools that use detention, they can use other things like part of their lunch could be detention after school, but we have to be mindful that we can't remove the recess for that process.
Any follow-up?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the committee who wish to speak? Any updates on the committee or the
Madam
members of the
Chair,
public?
members of the committee, we do not have anyone else on the platform registered to speak on this item.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, next item, please.
The next item is item number 3, which is a report with possible action on the Equity End of the Year Report, June 2023. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Will the administration please present the item?
Madam Chair and members of the committee, this evening I have with me members from the Black and Latino Male Achievement, Gender and Identity Inclusion, Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports, Restorative Practice, and Equity Access and Inclusion to bring to you the end of the year update on activities centered around equity in the district. I will turn it over now to Dr. Ellis to lead us through the presentation, and following that, we'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Dr. Ellis?
Thank you, Dr. Posley. Good evening, Chair Carr and members of the committee. My name is Patricia Ellis, Director of Equity, Access, and Inclusion. I am joined this evening by Nathaniel Deans, Director, Black and Latino Male Achievement, Lisa Salva, Supervisor, Positive Behavioral and Intervention Supports, Leon Gross, Director, Restorative Practices, and Ebony Lewis, Director, Gender and Inclusion Identity, to present the Equity End of Year Report. All work within the Milwaukee Public Schools is aligned to the 5 priorities for success. Throughout our presentation this evening, you will hear how each department's work supports each of these priorities. Our work is also aligned to supporting, enhancing, and enriching equity as reflected in Administrative Policy 1.06, Equity in MPS, and Administrative Procedure 1.06, Efforts to Achieve Equity. We will begin this evening's Equity End of Year Report with a presentation by Nathaniel Nate Deans, Director of the Department of Black and Latino Male Achievement, BLMA.
right. Chair Carr, members of the committee, Nate Deans, Director of the Department of Black and Latino Male Achievement. Happy to be here with you all. So we'll just start talking about some of the efforts that our department was able to do this year. And so you'll see on our slides, we have a little bit of statistics around the work that we did. Starting with our BLMA Buddies program, we were able to actually go into 14 buddy schools with a partnership with the community schools. And so our 4th and 5th grade young men had the opportunity to have conversations around academic success, leadership development skills, and mentoring and community building activities. And so with those conversations, we were able to eventually create a beautification project that they are currently engaging in now. And so by the end of the school year, you will see some beautification projects happening around the schools. With our Manhood Development Academy course, we were able to expand into next year into being into 6 schools. So having a curriculum around our 12 guiding principles and having conversations and also community-based events that connects with the curriculum that the young men are getting will be at a few of our other schools, so expanding that program. Our BLMA mentoring program growing from 7 schools to 12 schools this year, and being able to also bring in some community mentors as well to have conversations that will eventually impact the things that we're doing on a school-wide perspective. Our BLMA ambassadors program, so utilizing some of the young men from the mentoring at the 12 schools, and so having a direct impact at 3 of those schools to partner with our buddy schools to help have conversations around what does it mean to be a mentor, what does it mean to be a school leader, so that some of our young men who wanted to take the lead and the charge on doing that, we're able to do that with some of our 4th and 5th graders. And then also one of our biggest highlights was also being able to do the mental health symposium, having over 150 young men at Marquette's campus to have conversations around destigmatizing mental health. I know the last time we were here and we talked about the numbers, and there were a few, we were able to grow that, but then sustain that relationship with a lot of the folks that share this panel with me. So having gender and identity inclusion be included in those conversations, along with PBIS, the trauma care specialists, the restorative practices teams, as well as some other community-based folks. And just some of the efforts even outside of what's on the slide in terms of delivering professional development to staff, having the ability to do our cultural collaborations, professional development, over the summer at the Wisconsin Black Historical Society, teaching Dr. Gholdy Muhammad's HOL framework, some of the many principal leadership institutes that we were able to also talk about the framework. So really mirroring our professional development with the work that we're doing with our young men. And so with that, I will turn it over to Lisa Salva, PBS supervisor.
Chair Carr, members of the committee, Lisa Salva, PBIS supervisor in the Department of Equity, Access, and Inclusion. I'm here to share a few ways PBIS serves our schools and a few highlights from the 22-23 school year. I provided 2 attachments. The first attachment is a coaching support document showing the distribution of schools that the coaches serve. And the second attachment is around coaching responsibilities, and it provides more clarity around what coaches do day to day at each of the tiers. Even further breaks it down into the 4 focus areas of looking at intentional coaching, the school improvement plan, data, and professional development. So you can see on the document that, you know, their intentional coaching is really around teams. At Tier 1 would be PBIS, around school-wide school improvement plan strategies, systems, expectations, and procedures, and in the classroom, really those Tier 1 universal supports. So if we go to and look at some of the highlights from this year, they include under professional development, almost 3,000 staff attended PBIS universal supports during the Teacher Institute. 176 staff attended PBIS after-school professional development sessions that we had throughout the year. 133 SSTs attended a PBIS session during their institute. 49 staff attended a PBIS PD session at the Community Schools Institute, which we presented at. 55 new psychologists and social workers participated in PBIS and building intervention team training. We do trainings with them every year. And 39 staff were trained in wraparound and renew Tier 3 interventions. We have 6 sessions planned for this summer. We just added 2 more to make it 8 because our sessions are already full for PBIS implementation in the classroom. As far as our data highlights, as of May 19th, this year we increased the number of behavior interventions provided district-wide. Tier 2 interventions were a little over 4,000 last year, and this year we're at 4,500. And as far as Tier 3 interventions, last year were 325, this year we're 429. So we're increasing those services provided to our students. We increased the number of proactive teacher responses to behavior. A lot of our professional development this year focused on engagement opportunities, and then VABing, which is validating, affirming, building, and bridging, and those relationships, student-to-teacher relationships and student-to-student. So those 2 particular strategies were not on our PLP last year, so they didn't exist. But this year, we had 916 teachers use engagement opportunities as a strategy, as a response to behavior, being proactive, and 511 using VABing. But we also have on here the 5-to-1, so 5 positive to 1 corrective. That number increased, which is also a proactive teacher response to behavior, and brain breaks actually increased a lot from last year to this year. 21, 22, there were 820 of those documented, and this year there's 1,179. So thank you, and now I will introduce Mr. Leon Gross, Director of Restorative Practices.
Good evening, Good evening, Chair Carr, members of the committee. Leon Gross, the Director of Restorative Practices. Thank you again for allowing us an opportunity to come in and share with you. On behalf of the Restorative Practices team, I do want to take this opportunity to just highlight some of the work that we've been doing through the Restorative Practice Continuum, in particular, both the proactive and the responsive lenses, to try to liberate and create a situation where our students feel valued. And so some of the highlights that we've done here through our particular program is the exploration piece, where we have 11 schools that will now work with us in the upcoming school year. And basically what this means is that we have schools or sites that are interested in restorative practice, and we have met with them to highlight some of the areas where we can again begin to work with them around some of this liberated community. Additionally, we have 5 high schools where we currently offer restorative practices as an elective. And so from that perspective, what we're looking at doing is a semester-long course, but initially students are grounded in the foundational work of restorative practices. And then from there, they use that to focus on both resilience as well as self-discipline to try to help promote a community within their school. If they vouch to look at it as a second semester course, which we're working on in the upcoming year, then we focus on how those students can become circle keepers. And so we're working diligently to try to continue moving in an area, again, where you've heard me say we want to promote a liberated community in our schools. Some of the other work that we're doing, represented in the graph that you see below, is what you see our 7 coaches in the work that they're doing in the 8 schools that they're currently servicing. And what you see on the graph highlighted in the blue there really represents minutes that have been dedicated to the implementation as well as support systems within those schools. And so the blue really speaks to meeting with the leadership teams in those respective schools, also the BIT teams, Tier 1 intervention, also PBIS, and anything that really supports some of the groundwork and as you've heard from my colleagues, the institutionalization of some of these practices. What you see in the red represents coaching. And so through that lens, you're looking at it from either three tiers, if you will, kind of a pre-service where they're working with the teachers around creating agendas. And then there's also a co-facilitation phase in there, and then finally a debriefing stage. So those are the two areas where we've really centered a lot of our focus and supports in the schools, because we see the need not only through the lens of administrative support, but those leadership teams. And so if we can help ground some of the thought processes and practices within those areas, it makes it a lot easier to get into classrooms and support teachers around the actual co-facilitation. The other areas that you see represented there speak to professional development. And then finally, as again mentioned by my colleagues, and as a unified front, making sure that we're supporting Tier 2 and Tier 3 practices around intervention. And now I will introduce my colleague, Director Ebony Lewis, who is the Director of Gender and Inclusion Program.
Thank you for that. Good evening, Chair Carr and members of the committee. My name is Ebony Lewis, and I am the Director of the Gender and Identity Inclusion Department. I know it's a tongue twister, but I'm excited to be here with you all to share out our report on what we have done this year. There are highlights. You'll see they're broken down because we serve both girls of color and LGBTQ plus students within our district. And so we have coordinators that focus on both areas. So our highlights are broken down by girls of color, as you'll see on the slide, and then LGBTQ plus inclusion. And so I'll start with the girls of color outcomes. Looking at the highlights or outcomes, we've completed programming at elementary and middle school sites and supported approximately 150 students. One of those sites that I would like to highlight is Andrew Douglas, where we were there every week for the school year and have a lot of data and reports, and even are working on some highlight things to share out just to show how that support on that consistent basis really impacts our youth. We developed partnerships with Girls on the Run that started last semester. When we started, we had 4 sites that were participating. We ended the spring semester with 18 sites and served approximately 400 female identifying students through that program, which serves 3rd through 5th grade students. They end with a 5K, and it's really focused on physical activity while also supporting our mental and emotional well-being. And so great partnership that we want to continue to expand on. We also had our 2nd annual Denim Day event that we hosted this year at North Division High School. We had over 200 students that attended that. It's a day set aside for Denim Day where we highlight sexual assault awareness during Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and giving our girls, specifically female identifying students, what they need to understand consent, how to report, safe spaces, anything you can think of around that. And that was an extremely successful event where we had 100% of our youth identified through a survey that they had a better understanding of what consent was and how to report. And so outside of serving our students, we also piloted and kicked off our Miseducation of Girls of Color training this year, which was created 100% by Glenna Shawley Malone, our coordinator for Girls of Color. It's a 4-part series that looks at the data, that looks at case studies, and really gets down to what we need to best serve girls of color here specifically in our district. We were able to serve 500 staff with that training. That 500 received part 1. However, we had the psychs department, the social workers, and the trauma team that all completed all 4-part series. And that went, once again, extremely well, and we'll be partnering specifically with the psychology, social work department, and the trauma support team in this new year to really take what they learned and implement that through their work. And then just continue to develop district partnerships. and looking at building an advisory collective because we want to do more of the in-person work. And so looking at how we can lean on staff insights to help us build out that weekly practice of providing supports and safe spaces for our girls of color. And then next we have our LGBTQ plus outcomes. We have our gender sexuality alliances that we like to highlight. This year we had 30 schools that we worked with that have an active GSA, serving over 400 students, either participating in their GSA or special events. We also highlighted the GSA Advisory Collective, where those 30 schools, all of their advisors met monthly, received training, received lesson plans, supplies, different things to best serve their GSAs as a way to ensure that we sustain them as well as build more, because we know that that is one of the main ways that we can create safe space for our LGBTQ plus youth and allies. Approximately 750 staff were trained in the LGBTQ plus awareness module that was created, including 200 central service staff members. We continued support with our LGBTQ plus inclusivity partnership with the CDC Health for Everyone, where we're looking at how LGBTQ plus inclusivity impacts all students. So that is coming to a close, and eventually we'll have a report that the CDC will put together. They've done data collection. They've worked with the team on the YRBS data that we received. They've done environmental scans in 27 of the high schools, and so really looking at taking all of that data and compiling a report. And then last, we have our Welcoming Schools Partnership Training, which we recently completed in May of 2023. We have 15 certified Welcoming School trainers that will go out into the school year next year and help us train our schools, as many teachers, administrators, and support staff as possible on LGBTQ plus inclusivity, specifically looking at bias-based bullying prevention, embracing all families, intersectionality, and supporting non-binary and transgender students. And so that is my report. And with that, I will pass it back to Dr. Ellis.
Thank you so much, Ebony. Chair Carr and members of the committee, Patricia Ellis, Director of Equity, Access, and Inclusion, it is my honor and pleasure to share with you a sampling of the district-wide collaborative equity opportunities that engage students, families, staff, and/or the community in equity in academics through ambitious instruction, accelerating learning, especially in the areas of explicit instruction and student engagement, equity in cultural and linguistic awareness and responsiveness, equity in human resources, equity in finance, and equity for students, families, educators, and community stakeholders. These equitable opportunities play a critical role in helping our students to strive and thrive as scholars and leaders, as well as engage in opportunities that support and give them voice and enhance their well-being and social emotional development. Equitable opportunities such as these and many more that cannot fit on one slide allow students, staff, and families to engage in activities that support lifelong equity journeys in ways that foster standards of humanity, care, respect, and dignity, embraces all that is beautiful, inclusive, challenging, and thought-provoking about equity, opens doors to possibilities, nurtures skills, gifts, talents, and interests, promotes intergenerational learning, and allows everyone an opportunity to roll up our sleeves and engage our head and heart in equity work that meets the diverse academic, racial, ethnic, cultural, linguistic, and social emotional developmental needs of all students. Equity highlights for the 2022 through 2023 school year include students, families, community members, and staff members participating in the strategic planning process through surveys and community conversations. Additional information regarding these data will be shared at the Strategic Planning and Budget Committee meeting on June 22nd. This is the second year that MPS has held the district-wide spelling bee for students in grades 3 through 8. The spelling bee allows students to share their artistic skills and talents as well as their academic skills and talents. The spelling bee also supports providing equitable opportunities through an equity lens and engaging students in culturally responsive practices that support all students socially, emotionally, intellectually, and civically by leveraging students' lived experiences and learning styles to ensure academic achievement. Two noteworthy examples of how our students have impacted the community is after watching the MPS Spelling Bee, an assisted living facility for senior citizens held their own spelling bee. The first place winner was 87 years old, and the second place winner was 92 years old. In addition, a group came together at the barber shop to cheer our students on throughout the competition. These are just two of many examples of how the positive impact of equitable opportunities extend beyond the walls of our schools and positively inspire others. Next year, we look forward to not only engaging students in grades 3 through 8, but also grades 9 and 10 as a result of their voice requesting a spelling bee for them too. Young people, if you are listening, we heard you, and we will give you the same opportunity to engage in the spelling bee as students in the elementary and middle grades. Additional information regarding the participating students, schools, staff, and volunteers can be found in your spelling bee program attachments. On May 13th, the first Equity Summit was held at North Division High School. The staff and students representing the participating schools and department areas did an outstanding job presenting and sharing their equity work. Next year, we look forward to the Equity Summit continuing to grow by including more schools, departments, and student leadership groups. A copy of the agenda listing all of the outstanding participants is included in your attachments. We are excited to share that 137 students have received the seal of biliteracy and applaud the over 1,000 individuals who attended Cantos. Next year, we know that these numbers will even be greater. These opportunities, along with others highlighted on this slide and others much too numerous to name, reflect how equity work is continuing to take root and blossom because of commitment, determination, courage, diligence, fortitude, and tenacity. Such equity opportunities not only give our students diverse ways to share their voice, but also allow them to share their brilliance, joy, gifts, talents, knowledge, and wisdom. It has been a pleasure to share with you these highlights of equity in MPS on behalf of our students, families, and staff. Thank you to all who have and are opening your hearts and minds to celebrate and embrace the hills and valleys and challenges and successes that fuel our lifelong equity journey. Thank you for seeking and securing ways for our students to stretch their wings, navigate turbulence, and soar toward hopes, goals, dreams, and aspirations through diverse pathways, experiences, and opportunities. This concludes our report. We are more than happy to address any questions that you may have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you all. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak?
Madam Chair, we do have one individual on the platform prepared to speak on this item.
Okay.
We will go to our virtual testimony. Angela Lucas Foley, please state your name, spell your last name, and begin your testimony.
Angela Lucas Foley, Lucasfoley.
Thank you.
As I've done before, I come to you this evening as a white educator, a proud member of ARWE, aspiring anti-racist white educators of Milwaukee, and a parent of 2 MPS scholars. Once again, I am focusing tonight's testimony on follow-through from our board of directors. This body, current and former, have passed many resolutions that look to support transforming Milwaukee Public Schools and the quality of day-to-day experiences of all of our students, but particularly our Black and Brown students and family. As we head into summer, I offer some important questions to consider. What does investment look like when we are talking about equity in all of our buildings? What does divestment look like? What does our outcome data for Black and Brown students show us is really happening? Equity at its core should improve the product of education in multiple ways across all of our buildings. What comprehensive, family-centered strategy for transforming school culture is in place, or even in development? How do you know? I return once again to the resolutions that this school board has passed in pursuit of this goal. Does passing a resolution create change? Does listening to presentations from administration month after month create change? What are our parents and families saying? What investments have we made with our parents? How do you know? What are our students saying, particularly students at schools where their flagship status has never been as high as other buildings? What is their experience? What education product are they receiving? Is it good enough? As board members, you are the ones that we as taxpayers and community members have entrusted to pursue doggedly the answers to these questions. Godspeed and good luck.
Thank you. Are there any members of the committee who wish to speak? Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. I have a statement and just 2 questions. I just want to say how fortunate I feel to have my students in my children in a district that values equity, and in particular with the disheartening news of some of our neighbors who are making it increasingly unsafe for students who are LGBTQ, and employing some like Orwellian doublespeak about we need to take down signs saying that it's a safe place because that means that it's not safe. It is mind-boggling to see some of the decisions that some of our neighbors are choosing to employ at this time. And so I just want to say thank you to all of the staff who provided updates tonight, and to all of the staff members that you represent for all of the work that you're doing. I do think it's really important. We're in Pride Month, and I think it's very important that we discuss this, and I think the work that you're doing for GSAs are really important in creating safe spaces. So I just wanted to thank you for all of that work. I do have 2 questions. One is we talked about for the restorative practices that there are 5 high schools that have the elective courses. Would I be able to get a listing of what the 5 high schools are?
Administration.
Chair Carr, members of the committee, yes, the high schools that are currently being supported in that elective course are Audubon, Alliance, South Division, Vincent High School, and Marshall.
Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. And then my other question, but before I go to my other question, I did want to do another shout out for back to my statement. I believe a member of our staff was recognized by GSAFE as the Educator of the Year, and I just wanted to perhaps give administration the opportunity to brag about some of the good work that our staff is doing, if they would like to brag about that at this time.
Administration.
Yes, Chair Card, committee members. I know that Ronnie Rivera was also shouted out at the May board meeting, but in honor of Pride Month, yes, I would of course love to brag about my unicorn, Ronnie Rivera. He was named the Educator of the Year for the GSAFE Community Awards that they do every year. He has a standing partnership with GSAFE. He participated. There was a school from Milwaukee that got to participate in their middle school GSA conference that they do in Madison. He took a bus up there in February for that, and we will also be sending students to their conference this summer. They have a week-long conference for LGBTQ plus students this summer that we will be supporting going to that. I believe there are 25 students and then one staff member that will be supporting them in that. So yes, thank you for highlighting that. And we are so proud of Ronnie. We spent our weekend at Pride Fest in the youth area, and we also marched with Courage House MKE and several GSA students and staff in the Pride Parade this past Sunday. So very excited for all the work that we're able to do and represent our district that is allowing us to do this great work and create safe spaces for those that need us most. So thank you.
Any follow-up?
Yes, and thank you. I am actually wearing my Courage MKE fundraiser shirt tonight, so it's great that you brought them up. My last question is for Administrative Policy 1.06. So the update that we get in June is supposed to cover the extent of progress in fulfilling the equity goals, and then the equity goals are listed in that policy A through F, and I don't know the extent to which, when this policy was passed back in 2017, that specific benchmarks or how we would envision that, you know, when we say it's progress in fulfilling the goals, I don't know if it was described at that time, like this is how we know we're fulfilling those goals. So my question is maybe for administration, maybe for committee. This was passed in 2017. Do we feel like these equity goals are still the appropriate equity goals that we should be pursuing? Should we be updating them? And do we feel as a community, if we have successfully, I guess, described how we know that we're succeeding in these goals? Because I'll just be honest, for the first one, we'll create a district-wide culture of reflection and awareness building. Feels like so vague. I mean, I feel like we could measure success in any number of ways. So I don't know if they're specific enough. So I don't know if that's for administration, committee, or the listening audience to respond to. Maybe it's for all of us.
Administration.
Chair Carr, members of the committee, we would be very open to you taking a look at the current goals and letting us know, especially since we are in the midst of strategic planning. It's almost like this is perfect timing for that to occur. So thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, also to add, we kind of talked about earlier, Paulette Chambers is doing that blueprint of what's expected and what we need to do in each school and what that blueprint look like for each school. So we want to have all of that overlapping. So I think it will take, I would like to see the administration take some time and bring back the best thinking first. Then, and before we go into the idea of seeing, and then we could talk with the board about what's missing.
Thank you. Any follow-up?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Members of the committee, if I heard Director O'Halloran right, the policy is dated 2017.
You know, the one that I found, it says printed 9.7.2017. So
So this may be an opportunity for a policy review as well as the work is continuing.
I mean, a lot has changed in 6 years, so.
Thank you. Any other members of the committee wish to speak? Director Leonard?
So first of all, I miss you, Mr. Gross. We came to your building, you weren't there, and I said, oh, no. Anyways, I just have to sort of mirror what Director O'Halloran was saying, but our district, by far, to me, is going in the right direction. We have a ways to go, and that will become more clear as we look at those goals and see where we're really standing from building to building. So obviously, that is a challenge for administration. Sometimes you're going to have to make some tough decisions and make changes necessary to make sure that we're making these changes in every building so that we see that success. But I want to thank everyone. I always look forward to this meeting and your yearly report. We are going in the right direction. This is what we all should be doing, and I just thank you and just keep up the great work, and thank you.
Any other members of the committee wish to make comments or ask questions? Okay. There's no further discussion. Madam Chair, next item, please. I'm sorry, Madam Secretary. All righty. Well, thank you all for being here. If that's the last item, this meeting is adjourned. Have a great evening.